Claire was sold for $5 million. "Are you leaving me behind again?" her younger sister, now lying pale on the bed, asked sadly. Claire shook her head and stroked her sister's cheek. "I'm not leaving you. I'll come back," she promised softly. "Are you going to work again so you can pay for my treatment?" the younger girl asked. Claire's heart clenched at what she heard. "In that case, sis, please don't work anymore," Madison pleaded. "I don't want you to go through hardships because of me." She spoke slowly, like each word was twisting a knife in Claire's chest. Claire looked at her sister who, although weak, still managed to smile. Madison was not blessed with good health. Even at a young age, she had a heart condition, the same disease that took their mother's life several years ago. It hurt to think that in her short life, Madison had been denied the joys of childhood. Claire shook her head, refusing to cry. "I'm not suffering, Madison. I'll do anything for you. I'll be back, okay?" she assured. "For now, Aunt Nora will stay here with you. Just watch some TV. I'll come back and bring your favorite donut. Sound good?" Madison nodded sadly, then fell silent. Claire kissed her on the forehead before saying goodbye. It was just the two of them, because they had lost their parents early. Now that Claire was 21, she had to work hard for her 12-year-old sister. She had saved some money from her side gigs, but she knew it was still not enough. She needed a substantial amount for Madison's treatment. Earlier, Claire had listened to Kylie, who told her, "Why don't you become an entertainer, Claire?" Kylie snapped her gum and gestured at the people around them. "If you just stay here as a waitress in this bar, you'll only earn so much. Look at those other girls," she said, pointing at the women entertaining guests. Some were perched on laps, chatting. "They just sit like that and already earn more." Claire took a deep breath and shook her head. "I won't do that, Kylie. I have other jobs, so I won't force myself into a line of work I dislike, especially since I really don't want to." Kylie rolled her eyes, annoyed. "Come on, Claire, don't be so picky about work. You need money for Madison's treatment. We're not rich, and we never finished school, so there's not a lot of options." But Claire never intended to go that route, no matter how hard it got. She valued herself, and if Madison learned about it, the girl would be even sadder. Claire kept quiet, delivering drinks to the tables. "Here's your vodka, sir," she said, setting the tray on the table. An older man looked at her with lust in his eyes. He was seated with two younger men. One of them also glanced at her, while the other was glued to his phone. "Thank you," the bald older man grinned. "Can you sit beside me?" He patted the seat next to him. "Entertain me." Claire swallowed, then replied, "I'm sorry, sir. I'm just a waitress here, not an entertainer." "I don't care," he said. She was shocked at his words. He took out his wallet and pulled out some money. Her mouth fell open when she realized it was a large amount. "I'll give you money. Just sit beside me." Claire shook her head again and turned away. Perhaps it was rude of her to walk off so suddenly, but it was better than being harassed. She had barely taken a step when the man spoke again. "You've got a nice booty. Maybe I'll ask your manager for your name. I'll be back for you." Fear pricked at her upon hearing that, especially when she glanced back and saw his wide grin. One of the younger men looked at her too, but before Claire could say a harsh word, she bolted away. His laughter followed her. During her break, Claire stepped outside the bar for some fresh air. She let her hair down, ran her fingers through it, then retied it. She gazed up at the sky and gave a sad smile. "Please let it rain money so I can pay for Madison's treatment," she murmured. After a while, she decided to go back in, but stopped when she saw one of the men from earlier, the younger one, the one with the phone, standing there, looking at her. He was smoking, and it seemed he had been there for some time. Claire tried to walk past him, but he suddenly spoke. "If you really needed money, why didn't you accept my friend's offer?" She gaped at him, surprised, noticing the way his jaw tightened. "Excuse me?" She let out a hollow laugh. I don't even know you, sir, and I didn't accept your friend's offer because I don't want to. He turned toward her, and Claire froze at his handsome face. In that case, why are you here? He asked. I'm working, she replied firmly. What if I were the one offering you money? All you'd have to do is sit beside me. Would you take it? Claire could hardly believe what she was hearing. This man clearly thought too highly of himself. Sir, you're not special, she said bluntly. Just because you're handsome doesn't mean I'll throw myself at you. Everyone in this bar is here looking for a fling, and you're no exception. He looked annoyed. What? She crossed her arms. Sir, as bad as it sounds, I should still be thankful for people like you, because your reckless spending helps support people like us who are poor, especially me. He fell silent, so she continued. And don't worry, sir. When you come back, you won't see someone as rude as me anymore. Claire then walked away with her head held high. After that incident, she resigned from her job as a waitress, and no one stopped her. She no longer wanted to work in a place that made her feel uncomfortable. She later arrived home. Sis, she heard Madison say. Claire smiled and hugged her younger sister. She had brought apples, oranges, and donuts. See, Madison, I told you I'd come back, Claire remarked, placing the donuts before her. I bought these for you. Make sure to eat them, okay? Madison nodded and looked at her. Sis, I hope you can spend Christmas with me. You might go off to work again, Madison said. Claire felt a pang in her chest. She had missed last Christmas with her sister because she had to work. Of course, Claire said, smiling. I promise. Madison smiled back and took a bite of the donut. Claire soon found another job as a waitress, this time at a small diner. The pay was low, but she still had a few side gigs to get by. While serving food, she overheard a lively conversation between a group of gay friends, including the diner owner, Helen. Seriously, it's a big paying job. Yes, Helen, it's huge. What's the work about? You just wear sexy outfits, that's all. If you see someone who fits, call us at this number. Hey, we have a new hire here. She's tall and pretty. Claire, come here. Claire had just placed food in front of a married couple when Helen called her. She quickly finished setting their plates down and hurried over. What is it? She asked. Helen draped an arm around Claire's shoulder and faced the man who now eyed Claire from head to toe. This is Claire. Is she a good candidate? Helen asked him. He gave Claire a slow once-over. She's perfect. Sit for a moment, sweetie, the man said. Claire felt wary, but she complied. Helen left them, so Claire and the man were alone at the table. Do you really need money, dear? He asked with a grin. Claire nodded because it was true. Yes, I need it for my sister's medical treatment. He nodded too, and showed her pictures inside a folder. Women dressed in revealing outfits. She gaped at what she saw. Could you wear something like this? Claire swallowed. I've never worn anything like that. You'll earn big if you do, he said with a grin, making her more suspicious. What exactly is this job? Just tell me directly, Claire urged. He raised his eyebrows and laughed. Modeling. Her forehead creased. Modeling. He nodded. Yes, these are pictures of models wearing our clothes. They make a lot of money. She stayed quiet, doubtful of the job. I'm not forcing you, he told her, but if you change your mind. He handed her a calling card, which she slid into her pocket before returning to work. After her shift, she decided to visit the nearby mall to buy Madison a new doll. Her sister had asked for one before, but Claire hadn't had the money then. Now she thought she might afford it with her small savings. Claire noticed the saleslady kept glancing her way as she examined the dolls. Whenever Claire turned to look at her, the woman would look away. We meet again, came a voice behind her. Claire froze, recognizing it. At first she frowned, but when she saw who it was, her face tightened. She avoided his gaze, grabbed the nicest doll, and headed for the checkout. The man followed her, puzzling her even more. "Aren't you even going to acknowledge me?" he asked, sounding a little miffed. Claire glanced at him. "I don't know you well enough to greet you." He laughed. "Come on, I saw you here, so I figured I'd use this chance to apologize." Claire finished paying, took the bag, and said calmly, "It wasn't a big deal, so there's no need to apologize." She then strode away, irritated that he was still following. She had no idea what he wanted. Once she was outside, she whirled around to face him. "What do you want?" she asked, exasperated. He blinked, then grinned. "Let's grab a meal somewhere, my treat, as a way of saying sorry." Claire scratched her head and studied him. "That's not necessary. I already accept your apology. You can go now." He simply said, "Let's have dinner, and I promise you won't see me again after." Claire narrowed her eyes. "Really? Promise?" He nodded. "Yes." She sighed, eventually agreeing. He was too persistent. They drove to a fancy restaurant, and Claire felt awkward in her casual clothes, but she had no choice once he ushered her inside. "Have a seat," he said, and she sat across from him, scanning the upscale interior. "Is this your first time here?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes, first time." "It's obvious," he replied. She pressed her lips together. "I guess I stand out. Maybe I shouldn't have come here since I don't belong." He shook his head. "It doesn't matter who you are, as long as you pay." She gave a small laugh. "Well, I don't have money to pay for anything." He laughed back. "I told you, I'll pay. This is how I'm apologizing." "Why do you even feel guilty? It wasn't a big deal," she said. "I heard you quit after that night. I felt bad," he admitted. Claire sighed. "That's not really why I quit. I just want to feel comfortable at work." He nodded in understanding, and she accepted his apology. Claire marveled at how much he ordered. "That's it," he announced, picking up his fork. "Can you even finish all this?" she asked curiously. "It depends," he said with a shrug. Claire bit her lower lip and tried some food. "Could we maybe get a to-go bag if there's leftover?" He paused. "Why?" She looked away in embarrassment. "It'd be a waste if it's not eaten. I thought I might bring it home to my sister." He fell silent for a moment, then said, "Why bring her leftovers? Let's just buy fresh meals for her." She stared in disbelief. "Really? You'll pay for that too?" He chuckled, and Claire felt overwhelmed by his kindness. "Thank you so much," she said happily. After dinner, she was holding a large paper bag of food. She was sure Madison would be thrilled. He smiled at her. "That's good then. Would you like a ride home?" Claire would have liked a free ride, but she shook her head. "That's enough kindness, and I live in a neighborhood full of gossips. They'd never let me rest if they saw your fancy car." He nodded and pulled out his phone. Claire frowned when he held it out. "Why?" she asked. "Can I have your number?" he asked, causing her to blink in surprise. "Why?" He motioned at her. "I want to talk to you again. Get to know you, Claire." "I don't really like texting or calling," she said. "Besides, I'm busy." "You'll learn to like it because of me," he teased. "Now type your number. I'll text you." Claire hesitated, then keyed in her number before saying her farewells. She couldn't stop smiling on her way home. Even Madison noticed. "Sis, what's with you? You look so happy," Madison said, holding the new doll. She also spotted the takeout bag. Claire nodded, still beaming. "A nice guy gave them to me, Maddie. These are expensive, so don't waste any. It's really tasty." "It's so good, sis. This is my first time trying something like this." Claire grinned, watching Madison's excitement. She still couldn't believe some guy named Ethan had done so much for them. Is he your boyfriend, sis? Madison asked. Claire's eyes widened. He's not my boyfriend. His name is Ethan, she clarified, raking a hand through her hair. Just because she was talking to him didn't make him her boyfriend. By the look of him, a regular at a bar, he seemed like a flirt, yet she still felt butterflies whenever he messaged. Ethan, can I call? She nearly squealed after reading his text. She had just finished washing dishes at the diner and couldn't hide her excitement. Helen, her boss, peeked over. You okay, Claire? You're turning red, Helen asked. Claire quickly shook her head. I'm fine, Ms. Helen. Don't worry. Helen gave her a wary look, then went back to what she was doing. Claire glanced at her phone again. Ethan, are you busy? Claire scanned the area, then replied. Claire, text. I just finished washing dishes. You can call. Soon enough, her phone rang. She stepped away from the work area. Hello? She answered quietly. Claire, Ethan said softly. She could almost hear him exhale. Ethan, why'd you call? I just wanted to hear your voice. Why my voice? It's calming. It takes away my stress. Claire smiled. In that case, maybe you should record it or something. But I want to hear it every day, meaning, can I call you whenever? Sure, but I'll only answer if I'm not busy. That's fine, as long as you pick up when you can. Of course, Claire agreed. She heard him chuckle softly, then take a sip of something. By the way, did your sister like the food you brought home last time? He asked. Yes, she loved it. Thank you so much. Seeing her that happy, it's everything I want. That's great, Claire. I'm glad. So, when are you off work? I want to see you again. Claire's heart pounded. Sunday is my only free day. Perfect. Let's meet on Sunday? Sure, she said. Great. See you then. Claire ended the call with a smile, feeling light-hearted. When Sunday came, she met Ethan at a restaurant, and sometimes they went to the arcade or a movie. It was her first time experiencing these things with someone else. One evening, when they were in his car, Ethan asked, Can I court you? Claire turned to him in surprise. Huh? He repeated, I like you. I want you to be mine. Can I court you? He looked so serious that Claire's heart sped up. You want a girl like me as your girlfriend? She asked in disbelief. He frowned. What do you mean, a girl like you? I'm poor, uneducated, no achievements, she said shakily. He squeezed her cold hand. I know you're not well off, but you're kind, a loving sister, a good friend, and pretty. You're fun to be around. I can't stop thinking about you. Claire felt her heart racing. Ethan. He stared at her, and she finally gave a small smile. All right, you can court me. Sis, I want to meet that guy who's making you happy, Madison said one day, while Aunt Nora was helping her change clothes. You always come home smiling, and you always bring good food. I want to meet him, sis. Claire pinched Madison's cheek affectionately. You will, Maddie. I'm sure Ethan will be glad to meet you. He's a good guy and handsome to boot. Thinking of Ethan made Claire feel giddy. She remembered his charming dimple, how it lit up his face. Claire, you'd better be on your way or you'll be late, Aunt Nora said. That was Claire's routine. Monday to Saturday were for work and caring for Madison, and Sundays were for Ethan. She wanted to say yes to Ethan already. She had feelings for him too, but Aunt Nora advised her to wait, to make sure his intentions were genuine. One Sunday, Ethan gave her a bouquet of roses. She accepted them in awe, her heart pounding. She touched the petals gently, then glanced at him. Thank you, she murmured, lowering her eyes because she was blushing. Why are you looking down? He asked, tilting her chin up to face him. Are you shy? I'm not used to this, she admitted. He ran his thumb softly across her chin. Then get used to it. because if you become my girlfriend, this won't be a secret. I'll hold your hands like this." He laced his fingers through hers, so she looked at their joined hands. "And I'll hold you like this." He pulled her close, arms snaking around her waist. Claire felt lightning course through her at his touch. And finally, his gaze dropped to her lips. "I'll kiss you like this." Claire closed her eyes as he moved in. Her heart nearly stopped when their lips met, her knees going weak. When he pulled away, she slowly opened her eyes, meeting his smoldering look. "Like that," he said quietly. She smiled, lowering her gaze again. "Next Sunday, Ethan, let's meet up again. I have something to tell you," she said. He tried to hide his excitement and nodded. Claire went home that day in a daze of happiness, hugging her pillow and rolling around on her bed. For the next few days, they kept in touch via texts and short calls. Both were busy, but they kept reminding each other of their upcoming date. While serving customers at the diner one afternoon, Claire saw a familiar person come in. She tried to ignore him, but he removed his sunglasses, and she recognized him as the same man who had proposed the modeling gig. "Mars," Helen greeted him, pulling out a chair. "What brings you here?" "I'm here to see your employee, Helen. I want to know if she changed her mind." He smiled at Claire. She quickly shook her head. "No, I'm fine with this job." Helen had apparently told him about Claire's situation. "But Helen says you really need the money for your sister's condition, right?" He prodded. Claire's hands balled into fists under the table. "Yes, I do," she admitted softly. He raised an eyebrow. "Then why not take my offer? You've got nothing to lose, and you can help your sister's treatment." Claire couldn't speak. "Don't you want your sister to have a long life?" he asked pointedly. A sting clutched Claire's heart. Of course she did. Madison deserved to grow up and explore the world, not be limited by illness. "So think about it carefully. If you need a higher-paying job, come to this address." He handed her another card. Then he left. Claire's shoulders slumped. She forced herself not to think about his offer, focusing instead on the fact that Sunday was coming, and she would give Ethan her answer. "Sis?" Madison called while Claire was getting dressed. Claire turned to the younger girl. "What is it, Maddie?" Madison bit her lip. "Are you going to say yes to Ethan this time? I really want to meet him." Claire laughed. "Why do you ask?" Madison scratched her head. "Because I want to see him, sis. You keep bringing delicious food. When do I get to meet him?" Claire grinned. "Later today because I'm planning to give him my answer." "Yay!" Madison clapped. "I'm so happy for you, sis." Claire hugged her sibling, then finished getting ready and left. She headed to the city park where she and Ethan usually met. He wasn't there yet, so she sat on a metal swing and texted him. "Claire, text. Ethan, I'm here already. Where are you?" Several minutes passed without a reply. She decided to wander. As she walked, her phone rang. She thought it was Ethan, but frowned upon seeing Aunt Nora's number. She stopped and answered. "Hello, Aunt Nora." On the other end, Aunt Nora was crying. "Claire," the older woman managed between sobs. "It's Madison." She fainted. "We're at the hospital now." Claire covered her mouth with a hand, tears springing to her eyes. She brushed them away. "Aunt Nora, I'm on my way." She ended the call and ran out of the park. In her panic, she dropped her phone but didn't go back for it. A taxi stopped, and she jumped in, telling the driver to hurry. She practically threw her fare at him and dashed into the hospital. Claire burst into Madison's room. "Claire!" Aunt Nora called when she saw her sagging against the doorway, breathless. Aunt Nora quickly steadied her. Tears were streaming down Claire's cheeks. The doctor approached, and Claire rushed to him. "Doctor, how is my sister? Is she all right?" Claire looked at Madison, lying there, unmoving. Please say she's okay, please. The doctor inhaled deeply. She needs surgery right away before it's too late. Claire clamped a hand over her mouth, trying not to sob. Aunt Nora cradled her as she trembled. Claire, we can't afford something like that, Aunt Nora lamented. A transplant costs a fortune. That's the only way to prolong Madison's life. Claire collapsed to her knees, tears dripping onto the floor, fists clenched. There's nothing else we can do, Aunt Nora said sadly. Claire stood, still crying, and faced Aunt Nora. I won't give up on Madison. I refuse to lose her like we lost Mom. But where will you get that kind of money? Aunt Nora asked. We don't have it. Claire felt her heart sink. I don't know yet, but I can't give up. Suddenly she remembered the man who had offered her the modeling job. Perhaps he really did have the means to help. He knew about Madison's illness. Maybe it was a genuine chance. Wiping her tears, Claire looked at Aunt Nora. Aunt Nora, stay here with Madison. I'll be back. Aunt Nora looked alarmed. Where are you going? Claire didn't answer. She ran out of the hospital. Having lost her phone, she went straight to the address on the card. There she found two tall, imposing men at the entrance. Hold on, miss, one of them said, blocking her path. She clutched the card. Is Mr. Rivera here? Both men frowned and glanced at each other before they could say another word. Claire was about to speak again when the man she had come to see finally emerged. My dear, said Morgan, greeting her brightly. Are you here because you've changed your mind? Claire replied, I'm here because I need money. Morgan smirked. Come with me. However, the respectable work Claire had assumed she would find turned out not to be respectable at all. Once she stepped inside, Morgan roughly pushed her toward another flamboyant man. Her heart pounded, and she turned to him. What does this mean? She asked, her voice trembling. Morgan smirked at her. This is what I meant, dear. You're one of my best finds, so I'm taking you straight to the bidding. Claire's eyes went wide. You tricked me. He winked. Not really. You can still help your sister. You'll be able to afford her surgery. You should be grateful I gave you this opportunity. When one of the men grabbed her, Claire tried to break free. I don't want this. Let go of me. She was shocked when he suddenly choked her, making every hair on her body stand on end. You came to me. I didn't force you, dear. Now that you're here, you can't back out. The guests are already waiting, he said, laughing. So behave if you want your sister's life to be extended. He laughed again, then signaled to the other flamboyant man, and together they forced Claire to undress. She could do nothing but weep. She never thought she would be deceived like this. She had doubted them from the start because they were so pushy, but after seeing her sister's condition, she had let that pushiness slide, especially since Morgan came around a second time. Stop crying, girl, said Morgan's accomplice, who was also flamboyant. You're not going to die, and really, this is a 50-50 deal with Morgan. You're not getting a raw deal. All you have to do is sleep with some guy who wants you, and once that's done, you walk away. Claire's fists clenched. Don't worry about it, miss, he added. Morgan's not always like this. He's usually nice. Sorry if he hurt you, but he doesn't do it all the time. He tried to fix her hair while Claire shut her eyes, thinking desperately. How could she escape? Even if she did, where would she go? How would she pay for her sister's operation? They dressed her in a skimpy outfit. Soon, Morgan reappeared, now calm. Claire glared at him. Does doing this really help my sister? She asked, her chest tightening painfully. She couldn't believe what she was about to do. Is this truly how I'll save her? Morgan moved closer and wiped the tears from her cheeks. In this world, dear, you have to cling to anything you can to survive and to save a life, he said quietly. Sometimes we have to be dirty for someone else's sake. He gave her a bitter smile and went on. Don't worry, it's only one night. After that, you can return to your sister with plenty of money. But it's not easy at all, dear. Once you step out there, you'll face millionaires who are ravenous for someone beautiful like you. Claire's fists clenched again, but she kept quiet. She still wanted to run, but she also wanted to save her sister. She had no choice. She thought of Ethan. She had planned to give him her answer today, but that was impossible now. After tonight, she believed she would be tainted, and she didn't want Ethan to see her like that. Wiping her tears one last time, she walked out into a room where people immediately burst into cheers. Morgan was right. The men here were wealthy. And it wasn't just Claire. Other women stood on stage too, and she was the final one. Let's welcome our last item, Miss Claire, the MC announced, and the men roared in delight. She wanted to hug herself from the way they ogled her, but she endured for her sister's sake. Her knees shook in fear and dread. Who's bidding $50,000? Mine! A loud older man shouted, even standing up from his seat. 50,000 right away for Miss Claire. Going once, the MC exclaimed. 100,000, said a man in a hat. 200,000, another voice chimed in. Claire's jaw dropped when she recognized someone familiar smirking at her. A bald man who had once asked her to sit beside him in a bar. Why was he here? Wow, said the MC in amazement. Looks like many of you want a taste of our final item. Maybe raise it higher? The MC cackled. 500,000, someone called out. Claire closed her eyes and silently prayed it would end quickly. This woman is mine now. $1 million, declared the bald man. That made Claire feel like she was dying inside. 1 million. That's huge, the MC gawked. A first in our bidding's history, he said, raising a hand. Any takers? No one spoke for a moment, so the MC continued. Then our last item goes to Mr. The entire place fell silent as an unfamiliar voice spoke up. The door opened to reveal a man in a tailored suit who strode right up to the MC and whispered something. Claire saw the MC's jaw drop, and he nearly fainted. He shook his head, turned back to the crowd, and announced, Wow, this is insane, but we now have $5 million on the table. Claire's jaw dropped even further. 5 million for someone like her? Her tears dried up, replaced by shock. Before the MC could say another word, someone grabbed her hand. It was the man in the suit, who said nothing. Fear and anxiety returned as she thought of what awaited her. She hadn't even spoken yet when he pulled her out of that place. Outside, a fancy car greeted them. The man surprised Claire by placing a coat over her shoulders, covering her nearly transparent outfit. Where are we going? She asked, voice shaking. I want to go back to the hospital. She looked at him in shock when he opened the car door. For your sister, he explained. Our boss said you should go to her. Her heart transplant is happening tomorrow. Tears sprang to Claire's eyes. She had no idea what was happening, but if it was true, she should be thankful that his boss chose to send her back to the hospital instead of sleeping with her. Get in, miss, he said. Claire wiped her tears, nodded, and climbed into the car. For a moment she fell silent, wondering who this mysterious man was. He must have a good heart. She cried endlessly on the drive, her emotions swirling. She had been convinced she was about to condemn her soul for money, yet it hadn't come to that. They arrived at the hospital, and Claire leapt out, sprinting inside. People stared because of her skimpy clothes, but she didn't care. Claire, where have you been? Aunt Nora exclaimed, then gasped when she noticed Claire's outfit. Why on earth are you dressed like that? Claire shook her head. Let's talk about it later. Aunt Nora, how's Madison? Aunt Nora took her hand gently. A young man helped your sister. You'll be able to pay for her operation." Claire burst into tears. "I know, Aunt Nora. I just don't understand it. But I'm so grateful." Aunt Nora wiped Claire's cheeks. "Go see your sister. She's waiting for you." Claire's lips trembled, and she quickly dried her tears and steadied herself. "She's awake? Really?" Aunt Nora nodded. "Yes, she's asking for you." Claire inhaled sharply and rushed into the room where her sister lay. Madison was on her back, hands folded on her stomach, staring at the ceiling. Claire wiped away another tear and inched closer. "Sis," Madison said sadly, "were you crying?" Claire didn't answer, only looked at her with hurt in her eyes. "Don't cry, sis," Madison pleaded. "The doctor said I'm going to get better." Claire nodded and took Madison's hand. "Yes, you will. I know it," she whispered. She closed her eyes as Madison's small hand reached up to touch her tear-stained cheek. "Stop crying, sis," Madison said. "Once I'm better, will you introduce me to the person who makes you smile?" Claire suddenly remembered Ethan. She hadn't met him earlier, and she lost her phone. She wondered if she even had the right to face him now. She clasped Madison's hand and nodded. "Of course, I'll introduce you." Claire's anxiety only grew as Madison's operation day approached. She clutched a rosary, praying silently that it would be successful. She wanted to show Madison so many things she had never experienced. She wanted her sister to be there at Christmas and be able to truly enjoy life. Claire stayed awake the entire time, waiting for good news. After hours of anxiety, the doctor finally emerged from the operating room, mask still in hand. He removed it and turned to her. "Congratulations. The surgery was a success." Thank you, Claire gasped. She sank to her knees, overcome with relief. Her hands trembled and tears fell. But this time they were tears of joy. Her sister's life would be extended. "You should thank the person who helped her, Claire," Aunt Nora reminded her. Several days later, Claire still felt elated by what had happened. Instead of bad luck, it was a blessing. She remained grateful to that person who had helped them, even though he never came back. They were still at the hospital, but there were no bills to pay. Everything was covered, with no demands in return. It was as if the one who had bid $5 million had done it solely to pull Claire out of that hellish place. "Yes, Aunt Nora, but I never got to see him, not even once," Claire murmured. Aunt Nora sighed, pulled out an envelope from the side table, and handed it to Claire, who frowned. "A man came up to me while I was getting fresh air," Aunt Nora explained. "He told me to give this to you. Maybe this is your chance to thank the one behind everything." Aunt Nora gave Claire the envelope, and Claire accepted it at once. She opened it carefully. It was a letter. She read the words quietly. "Today, Miss Claire, I want to claim what I desire." Claire swallowed hard, guessing he might want her body. She forced a wry smile and looked at Aunt Nora. "Aunt Nora, I need to step outside a moment." "What does it say?" Aunt Nora asked, noticing the startled look on Claire's face. "You look like the sky just fell on you." Claire swallowed. "Ah, he wants to meet, but there's no address," she fibbed, though it was true there was no location given. She felt disappointed. Of course there was a price for his help, but she had no right to complain. Without his money, she wouldn't be able to spend time with her sister now. She stood up and glanced at Madison, who was sleeping peacefully. "If he shows up here, Aunt Nora, tell him I went out." She kissed Madison on the forehead and then left. Stepping outside, Claire was surprised to see a sleek black car. From the front seat, a man in a dark suit climbed out and opened the back door. She offered no resistance and got in. Once inside, nerves flooded her. She was so uneasy she nearly hugged herself. Her own body, she thought, was the price for this successful operation, and there was nothing she could do about it. They arrived at a large house after several minutes of driving. For a moment, her fear faded as she admired how beautiful it was. "Follow me, miss," said the man, entering quickly. Claire hurried after him, not even able to appreciate the interior's beauty because he walked so fast. She didn't want to get lost. They stopped in front of a door, and her dread came rushing back. She heard her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. The man knocked 3 times. "Sir, she's here," he said. "Come in," answered a low voice from inside. Claire's legs felt weak with fear. This might be the end, she thought. She wouldn't be able to face the person she loved afterward. The man opened the door, revealing a dark room. Claire stepped inside and jumped when the door slammed shut behind her. She swallowed hard, unsure of what to do. Glancing around, she stopped cold upon seeing a man standing with his back turned, facing a window. Claire drew a shaky breath. "Sir?" He didn't reply, so she continued in a trembling voice. "Thank you so much. I can't hold back my emotions while talking to you. You saved my sister. She's alive because of your help." Tears slipped down her cheeks, and she quickly wiped them away. "If there's anything you want from me, I'll do it," she said, eyes closing. Even though it went against her will, she felt compelled to repay that huge sum, and it seemed foolish to think there would be no strings attached. She lowered her gaze. The man turned toward her, but she kept her head bowed, not wanting to see his face. She was scared. "There's only one thing I want from you," he said. She swallowed even harder at the sound of his footsteps coming closer. "I want to know when you're going to give me your answer." Claire's eyes snapped open. She let out a startled gasp and looked up, frozen in shock. Standing there, smiling, was Ethan. Ethan?" Tears sprang to her eyes. She couldn't believe it. He nodded. "Yes, it's me, and I'm happy your sister is safe." She could no longer hold herself back and threw her arms around him. He hugged her in return, and she squeezed him so tightly it was almost painful. I thought, she sobbed. "I wouldn't allow you to just give yourself up to some random man, Claire," Ethan murmured, still embracing her. "And don't worry, they've all been arrested. They won't be able to victimize anyone else again." Claire nodded, still clinging to him. Ethan, can I just stay here?" She stood quietly at his side, staring at him as though in a trance. She still couldn't believe it. "Ethan, I can't believe you're the one who helped me," she whispered. He gently touched her cheek. "I was just waiting for you to ask for help, but I found out from your aunt that you vanished after your sister's complications, and I got suspicious. I had someone follow you." She nodded, looking away. "I thought I wouldn't see you anymore. I was ready to disappear if someone else had touched me." His jaw tightened. "It's a good thing I was the one who got you out of there. I wouldn't let you avoid me, Claire, especially now that my feelings for you have grown too deep." Her heart pounded at his words. She met his gaze, noticing the intensity in his eyes. "Are you serious?" she asked softly. "Completely," he said in a steady voice. "I'm not letting you go. I've fallen in love with you." Claire's lips parted, and Ethan asked, "So, what's your answer?" She bit her lip and looked at him with eyes gone misty. "You've made me feel like I'm more than just some girl who's only focused on her sister's illness. You've made me realize I can laugh, date, and feel giddy. Everything is so new to me, Ethan. It's my first time experiencing all of that thanks to you." He smiled. "Then tell me again, what's my question?" She flushed, and he grinned. "Can you be my girlfriend?" Claire nodded immediately. "Yes, Ethan, yes." His smile widened, and he pulled her closer, kissing her softly. Madison was eventually discharged from the hospital, thrilled to finally meet Ethan. They were at home now, with Madison peeking every so often at Ethan, who smiled back. "Ethan, thank you so much for helping me," Madison said. "I have a new heart, and it beats really well." Claire smiled, and Ethan did too. "No problem, Madison. A sweet girl like you deserves the help. You said you want to study again, right?" Madison nodded. "Yes, so I can help my sister." Ethan glanced at Claire. "Where are you two spending Christmas?" Claire blinked. "We haven't planned it yet." "Could I spend Christmas here with you?" Ethan asked. Before Claire could answer, Madison spoke up. "Yes, come spend Christmas with us. My sister makes delicious spaghetti." Claire blushed. "You know how to cook?" Ethan asked, surprised. She nodded. "Of course I do. I had to learn because of my sister." He nodded thoughtfully, then turned back to Madison. "So, do I have your approval to be with your sister?" Claire's eyes went wide at Ethan's question, but Madison grinned. "Yes, I approve. Even before you helped me, I wanted you around because you always make her smile. She's not sad all the time anymore because of my illness. I want my sister to be happy, so please, please don't hurt her." Claire felt touched by her sister's words. Ethan flashed a reassuring smile. "I'd never hurt your sister, Madison. She's the one who might end up hurting me." Claire glared at him in mock warning, and Madison laughed, as did Ethan. Claire just shook her head and smiled. A few months passed, and Christmas arrived. True to his word, Ethan spent Christmas with them. Their house was small, but he didn't mind at all. He stayed over so much he practically lived there. He had even asked if Claire and Madison wanted to live at his place, but Claire refused, so he was the one who adjusted. In the months since they became a couple, Claire learned Ethan wasn't just kind. He was also a fantastic kisser. In fact, they almost took things further a few days ago, but Madison interrupted them, looking for her sister. One day, Claire heard a car honk and excitedly rushed outside. Ethan had arrived, carrying trays of food, and more. He was also holding flowers and some gifts, accompanied by a few helpers. "Sorry," he said sheepishly. "I couldn't bring it all on my own, so I brought some helpers." Claire blinked, watching the helpers carry in several kinds of food. "Wow, that's a lot," she exclaimed. "Well, I'm spending Christmas here, so I figure we need plenty," Ethan teased, biting his lower lip. Claire noticed he held a bouquet, and she self-consciously tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "Why the flowers?" she asked. He walked closer. "Don't you remember?" She frowned. "What are you talking about?" He nodded toward the date. "Besides celebrating Christmas, it's also our 7th month together." Her eyes grew wide. "Really? We're celebrating that too?" "Of course," Ethan said, "and I want more month-series with you, Claire." He handed her the roses, and she took them with her heart pounding. She swallowed hard when their eyes met. Smiling, Ethan took her hand, lacing their fingers. "Let's go inside. I'm sure Madison's excited to see what I brought for her." Hand in hand, they walked in and got ready to celebrate Christmas, all of them smiling. "Lord, thank you for this blessing," Claire prayed quietly. "Thank you for letting me meet Ethan. Thank you because my sister is safe from her illness. And thank you for letting me feel love." "I love you, Ethan," she added, gazing at the sky. They stood outside the house, waiting for midnight, hoping to watch fireworks. Claire wanted more hours, days, months, to reach years. "That'll happen," Ethan said, as if reading her thoughts. She looked at him curiously. "We'll reach years together," he assured, taking her hand. "We'll always welcome Christmas together. Would you like that?" She nodded. "Of course. Who wouldn't?" "And when we get married," he teased, "I'm going to make sure we have a bunch of kids." Her cheeks flamed. "Huh? How many?" "A whole basketball team." she joked, giving him a playful shove. "Why don't you be the one to give birth?" He laughed and slipped an arm around her shoulders. Together, they turned to the sky. "I'm so happy right now, Claire, because you're here," Ethan murmured. She smiled. "I'm happy too," she admitted. When midnight struck, fireworks burst in the sky, and they watched with broad smiles. Sold for $5 million. What lesson did you learn from this story? Feel free to share your thoughts, and rest assured, Claire would read and appreciate them. Many, many thanks. The end.